Okay, so can we talk about this? Uh, Today is probably one of the more weirdly controversial bikes that I've ever discussed. I don't understand the reasoning behind it. It reminds me of when I was younger and people, or now when people sit there and bash each other for having a two-stroke versus a four-stroke. Today, I want to go electric and talk about something that for some reason is an electric conversation. That's a legitimate concern to say range anxiety. Okay. Or I'm concerned because it's a relatively new brand and I don't want to spend $14,000 on a potential brand that might go away. That's a legitimate concern. Why is that not what people are saying? Why are people only talking about what this bike says about the rider? Here we are at Stark Varg's webpage. It's very pretty and all that stuff. But what is it? So it's just enduro versus motocross. They started with motocross, I believe, because they thought that the rechargeability of the battery and the electric bike would suit motocross better. I think they really only expected the bike to last for maybe like one, two, three motos and then be done. Because they always brag that it had the same range as a 450 motocross bike, which is not really a big brag. I kind of always thought that was a hilarious brag because a 450 motocross bike has a really terrible range. But since then, they've changed and they hired a guy named Tadej Blazusiak. If you don't know who he is, or if all you know is that he hit some guy at a race and that's why he doesn't work for them anymore, you guys really need to do your homework on this guy. He has won countless championships in different disciplines. And when that incident happened, it was during practice. So something was going on, something happened, there was a disagreement, and I don't know what it was. There hasn't been any information released on that. I don't know why Tadej Blasuziak no longer rides for Stark. All right, so it's the MX versus the EX range. So that makes perfect sense. Stark has always talked about being the most powerful dirt bike, being the most powerful dirt bike, and they have 80 horsepower. So up to. I believe that how it works is you can buy a 60, yeah, you can buy a 60 horsepower package or an 80 horsepower package. Here's, I'm just going to go on record. There isn't a normal person that's going to ever use the 80 horsepower. They might put it on there and for a giggle, but the second they hit 80 horsepower, they're going to be spinning the rear tire and they're going to be traction limited. Actually, even at 60 horsepower, they're going to spin the rear tire and be traction limited. But personally, if I were to purchase this bike, the only reason I would buy the 80 horsepower option is for resale later because I know that the next person that wants to buy it is going to be like, oh, is this the Alpha? I want 80 horsepower. So I would honestly click that for an extra $1,000 just to make the next person that I potentially sell the bike to happy. I would have no intention of ever using it, maybe for some videos or just for grins and giggles. If you disagree, please let me know why. I think roads maybe that would be good. I will say that doing the basic research for this video, I noticed something very different about the way that Stark Futures works. And I want to talk about that. That's going to be a main point in this video that makes this bike genuinely tempting to me. They have options. What? Yeah, so it's not just horsepower. I thought it would be, just horsepower and then rear brake and stuff. So you also have the option of moving your rear brake up into where your clutch used to be, but you can just have your feet never move off the pegs. You don't ever have to hit the rear brake. You don't ever have to shift gears. Your feet are just you're on the balls of your on the balls of your feet, and you're just riding. So yeah, that would be hard to get used to. No lie. Foot brake would be pretty simple, especially for wheelies and stuff. But I think it would be worth taking the time to get used to the handbrake. So that's an option. Obviously, you have the power option, you have the brake location option, the suspension. This is yet another thing that no other brand does. You can buy this bike with soft, if you're a lighter person, medium or hard suspension. That's insane. Literally no other brand does that. You have to go to a tuner or buy the parts yourself aftermarket in order to change your suspension. They will have adjusters and clickers, but those genuinely don't do that much. You'll notice if you go from all the way in on the clickers to all the way out on the clickers, you'll be like, oh, I noticed a difference there. But stock suspensions are, the springs are set for the guy who weighs between, I think KTM is around 70 to 75 kg, which is me, so I'm lucky. But for anybody else, they have to either get a stiffer or softer spring. Usually it's stiffer, and it's just costs you money. The KTM doesn't. They don't care. They're not going to do that for free. This literally adds no extra charge to the bike. Changing this to hard to soft to medium, it's the same price. That is wild. So I'm just right now. I'm just going over. This is not a sales pitch. I just genuinely think that all motorcycle brands need to do what Stark is doing here. They give you options again for tires. Like some of these, they cost more. They have this Stark power tube, which I think is silly. It's just a plastic tube. It's really lightweight tube, and that's standard. So if you want this bike, you get the Metzler's 6 days. Tires, they're tires, man. You're gonna go through them so fast it doesn't really matter. But if you want to just start off with a Moose, you can. That's really cool. They sell it with the X Grip Medium Moose, which is probably, I'm guessing, like 12, 16 psi. So that's pretty good. I like that. But if it's an extra $190, you're gonna if you look up the price of mooses and look up how to install them, it's actually kind of a pain in the butt. So the price is actually pretty good for a moose, and you don't have to install them yourself. You will with moose comes care. You do have to lube them up and stuff. So it's not like they're totally without maintenance. A lot of people think they are, but no, you still have to pull them out and lube them up. But you have a lot of options as far as tires go. They even have this Pirelli MT Rallycross, which is more like a road-ish tire, which is pretty interesting. I've never used the Michelin's. I've used the Metzler's before. They're okay. I wouldn't like go write a letter or anything about how great they are, but they're pretty good. I've never used their soft Metzler's. That might be an improvement. But like the fact that you can change these is wild. That's not something again any other brand does. They just say this is the tire. It comes with the tire and it comes with a moose. That's it. This is new. This is different. I didn't notice these protectors before. This is pretty sweet. Typically, I would buy these from a Cherubies because a Cherubies gives me a discount as a sponsorship. But the fact that they're right here and they are designed by the same people that designed the bike, so they look pretty cool. I like that. If you want a front disc protector, you want a rear disc protector, those are like absolute go-to musts, especially for rock people like me. You can't not have those protectors. So I click them. There's another tab for titanium foot pegs. $200 for those is actually not too terrible. It's not great, but I'm not the type of person to buy titanium pegs, and I'm sure not the type of person to spend $600 to lose 900 grams. But you can, and it's an option. They are really proud of their titanium and 3D printing, so I understand why they include this. I've done quite a bit of research into this company. This is a rare one for me because typically I go into these completely stone cold blind and don't really know what I'm talking about. And I just look and I react as I go. But this bike, I do know quite a bit about, and I know its history because of Taddy Blazusiak and Eddie Carlson. I think they've done a really good job marketing it. But anyways, we're just talking about the options at this point. This is probably a lot of people have clicked away, but if you're still here, I appreciate it. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of this. Let's talk about specs. 80 horsepower, 60 horsepower. Honestly, if I was going to have this bike, I'd probably put it in 40 horsepower and mess with the regen, or lower horsepower and mess with the regen, depending on what I'm doing. If I'm racing in sand or the dunes or something like that, I'm going to put the horsepower up higher. If I'm racing what I normally do, I don't need that much horsepower. It's momentum and conservation of speed is more important than the amount of power that you have to put down. So technique. Weight, 120 kilos. That's pretty heavy, but it's not as heavy as you might think. Like a rally bike, for example, is substantially heavier than that. So that's only, I think, it's only like 15 kilos more than my bike is wet. Warranty, where was it? No, riding time up to 6 hours. I kind of call BS on that. I don't think that someone is going to get 6 hours of riding time unless they're just absolutely low settings and just putting around. I think it's probably, for a normal person, probably way less than that. Charging time 2 hours. I don't know one. The warranty though being 2 years is really good. The last episode I did was Triumph, and they had a 30-day warranty. It's like 30-day any problems. I'm like, well, yeah, if there's problems within a 30-day period, you should just no brainer the bike goes back. That's not even like an issue of warranty. But they said they have a 2-year warranty, so that's actually worth noting. That's a big deal. I believe this is a picture of Eddie Carlson. Svednik on Instagram. Oh, this is something I didn't talk about. It comes in different colors. Perhaps I'm wrong on this, but name any other enduro dirt bike brand that sells their bike in different colors. If you buy a Suzuki, it's yellow. If you buy a Kawasaki, it's green. You buy a KTM, it's orange. That's just how it is. But they are like, well, you can have it in red. You can have it in white. You can have it in gray. To me, these are a base so that when I put my graphics on, yeah. So I would basically probably buy white or gray, depending on what graphics I want to run. So, anyways, I think that's just another cool option that I didn't talk about. Range. I do like that they like kind of they actually back this up with video. So the reason they're saying 6 hours for the amateur is because they had one of their amateur riders go out and ride it, and it took him 6 hours to drain the battery. They also had, I believe it was Eddie. I don't remember if it was Eddie or Taddy at the time, but they had one of their pro riders riding, and they had someone in the middle riding, and they did all this on video. I don't really believe it. I think that it was that the beginner rider was taking more breaks than they showed. I think he was probably a beginner rider, so he probably was out of breath and really tired. And it's just that doesn't really say that the bike can last 6 hours. I think it's probably more accurate to say less than that. Range enduro, they've proven it's about an hour or hour and a half. When Eddie Carlson takes this bike and they go to enduro events, they did a battery change one time. I just wish that they would take note of this during races and say, oh, we need to be able to change the battery quickly, because they do sell batteries. You can buy one. I checked. Their parts department's very good. I know it sounds like I'm bragging, trying to sell these bikes, but I'm really not. I think the way that they do business is really good. But why the heck do they not make it easier to swap? You think that because they're racing with people like Taddy and Eddie Carlson, that when they need to change the battery and they have to take the whole bike apart to do it, they might think, well, we're going to make it an EX version. Let's make the EX version have a hot swappable battery. Not even hot swappable, but just easier to swap. I feel like they dropped the ball on that pretty hard. And if you haven't noticed, I don't bag on them very often. I actually really like a lot of the things that they're doing, and I'm with them most of the time. But that one's just such a stupid, huge ball drop that I just can't understand how the heck they managed to just be like, oh yeah, we've done this, we've experienced it during the races. They've lost the race. They were in the lead by a large margin on a couple of these big international races, and they outright lost that lead and didn't even end up on the podium because it took them so long to swap the battery. If all they had to do was come in, push a button, maybe unscrew a screw, whatever the case may be, maybe 3 or 4 screws even, bolts, whatever, it just make it so it didn't take 15 to 20 minutes. It only took 5 minutes. So the ball was dropped there. Let's move on though. We filmed it. The full uncut range test is available. It's all right there. I like the transparency. Although, like I said before, I think that 6 hours is 6 hours. It takes an amateur 6 hours to drain the battery. I don't think that the range is 6 hours. I think that they should have said it takes an amateur 6 hours to run this down. Okay, so here's more marketing. Power like a 450. Yeah, that's cool. But let's just keep going down. Low maintenance. I do care about sustainability. That is something that I think that people should care more about, but I don't think that our vehicles are going to be the main thing. I think we throw away so much plastic that was was at one point in the ground as oil, that's something we should care more about than our vehicles' sustainability. So scrubbing over that. Low maintenance though, that is a big deal. Low maintenance is a very big deal. I own a 2-stroke 300, and it's been pretty low maintenance. But it's still maintenance. I still have to do pistons. I still have to do, obviously, oil pumps. There's all kinds of stuff. Clutch. There's a lot of maintenance involved with dirt bike riding. Low maintenance there still is maintenance on these. Like, I'm still going to go through tires. I'm still going to go through chains. I'm still going to wreck things. And those things will have to be swapped out. But maintenance to me is like, I need new rims. So for a lot of people, maintenance is simple, like oil changes. But to me, maintenance includes, I bent my bars. So I need new bars from Renthal or whatever. Yeah, so their maintenance costs are low. They're saying like 500 euro over 100 hours of use. I guarantee you someone that rides this hard is going to buy new plastics. They're going to be buying new seat covers, new bars. It's going to be more than 500, but they probably don't consider that to be maintenance. But still, that is something to note. Electric vehicles are going to have lower maintenance costs. That's just the way it is. They don't have as many moving parts. So that's a good point that they made. With this bike, they came out with a new display phone, which is cool. I mean, I personally go through phones so fast that this kind of scares me, and I break displays a lot. So what I would do is plug this in and get the bike ready to go and take it out. I would not leave that in to ride. I know that they probably have proven that it's completely fine, but I guarantee you I'll break it. I've broken 3 KTM little displays, and I have broken a many other larger displays too. But the phone acts as not just a cell phone and not just a display, but this is how you interact with your Stark, I guess. Which kind of brings us. Oh, over the updates is really cool. there's a there's an actually an update that gave people just like 10% more battery life. So people who had already purchased the bike and were either happy or whatever, they just woke up one day and had more battery life. That's really cool. Imagine you wake up and your dirt bike gets better fuel efficiency. That's pretty wild. There's one thing I really want to talk about that I don't see in here. Fully adjustable. Yeah, it's the adjustability of this bike is what makes this one so exciting to me, and what makes me very confused as to why people hate on it so much. You can adjust the power with just like a simple click of the button, but you can also adjust the recharge. So like essentially engine braking. If you have it fully cranked up, it's going to feel like a 500cc 4-stroke. But if you have that recharge basically turned off, it feels like a 125 2-stroke. So you can adjust that. That's pretty wild to be able to say, oh, I can have a bike that ranges from a 500 or bigger in both acceleration and deceleration without using your brakes. So engine braking all the way to like a 125, both in power and in engine braking. So you could also say, well, I want to see what a 454 stroke would feel like with the engine braking of a 125 2-stroke. That's an option. You can do that. That's pretty wild. And you just have that versatility. So essentially you're buying one motorcycle, but it has the ability to feel like a bunch of different motorcycles. There's a bunch of stuff that I was reading that they do that they're not discussing here. And I don't know if that's because they don't do it, or if perhaps I read wrong. But I was told that it comes like what the bike comes with. There's so much stuff that it's not talking about. Maybe it's in here. Okay. So we'll keep going and we'll talk about the specs and the numbers. And this is really where you see, if you know what you're looking for, this is where you're going to find what you're looking for. It's going to be tough though, because obviously a lot of these specs are going to be electric based. Like I don't know what a 7.2 kilowatt hour battery. I don't have anything to compare that to. The motor carbon fiber housing, cool. Like I understand what carbon fiber is and that it's housed in it, so it's lighter. But it could be magnesium. That it doesn't make a difference to me. Brakes are Brembo. That makes something to me because I have felt Brembo brakes. Brembo brakes are good. They're reliable. I like that. I like that they went with Brembo. Charger, again, one of those things that I personally can't relate to. I think that's good. Maybe electric bike guys can say that's good. Tires are your standard enduro tires, 21, 18 in the rear. I have heard, though, that you can't really play with the thickness of the rear. Otherwise, it starts rubbing on stuff, and that sucks. Because I actually do play. I like to try a thicker tire for some things, a thinner tire. I like to mess around with that, and that sucks that you can't do that. The drive is just a standard chain and a sprocket. This bike, this is going to be one of those rare circumstances where I say that the rear sprocket, you don't change that ever. You don't change the sprocket, front or rear. I've actually read people saying they change the sprocket to make it more torque, and it doesn't change the way the bike rides at all because all that stuff is done via the electric motor. So it actually kind of messes with the bike a little bit to make those changes. So you don't have to have separate sprockets and chains depending on the race. It's just that's another thing you don't have to think about anymore. You just have to think about chain maintenance and make sure that the sprocket is in good condition. But changing your sprockets doesn't do anything on this bike, which is interesting. The rake, I need to do a little bit more research on this. That's the angle that the forks come off of the main body. I need to research that because that does change per other models, and that affects the way the bike turns in and corners. I've heard really good things about this bike and its cornering. Wheelbase, I feel that's a weird number to say. I think that 48.8 centimeters it can be adjusted pretty easily with, so, if you want a hill climb, you want a longer wheelbase. If you want a more agile, hard enduro bike, you want a shorter wheelbase. Torque, that's a ton. Yes. Torque, yes, is what the real answer is. Frame chromoly steel. It's actually kind of hard to say that this is even a chromoly steel frame because the battery is load bearing. So the frame itself isn't flexing and moving around like your standard dirt bike is. It's all probably pretty stiff. I'm just going to make a guess there because even though it's a steel frame, which are considered to be softer, I think they did a steel frame because if they did an aluminum frame, it would just be so rigid. So this is probably a pretty stiff bike frame-wise because the frame is connected to the battery and the battery is part of that. Suspension is KYB. Closed cartridge, coil frames, coil springs. So the KYB suspension is very good. That's just out of the box. It's considered to be very good. And because you can adjust the springs and make it softer or soft or hard or medium, really you're set up from out of the box. You're set up out of the box with already a pretty darn good suspension. That's not something you're going to be changing, honestly. Fully extended. 990. So that's the same as the Triumph. So I'm guessing this is standard. My bike is a little lower than that. And you can change that just by shaving the seat, changing the seat cover. You could put more foam or remove foam to the seat. That's not a really hard thing to do. You don't change your sag to lower your bike. That is not how you do it. You would adjust your seats. Homologation, they've been working really hard with AMA and FIM to make this bike something that they can race. So I've heard that when you go to a race and maybe that race organizer says, well, you can run this bike, but it has to have XYZ in the app. And then people will ask, well, how do we know that they don't just change it halfway through the race? Well, this homologation is so that they make it that when the organizer puts it in race mode and says enter, it's 24 hours before you can make any changes whatsoever to the bike. So it kind of like hard sets all the settings in so that during the race you can't change it, or during the different motos of the day you can't change it. That's a pretty cool idea. Yeah. Bodywork. It's a really beautiful bike. Like that's obvious. Chassis. See, I'm trying to look for things that are suspension. We already talked about. Chain sprockets can't change. Wheels. They're actually the same wheels that are on my KTM. My 2019 KTM uses the same hubs and rims that KTM uses. So that's a good thing. It means you can get wheel bearings and stuff like that really easily, or you can get some Excel rims or something when you break them. Handlebars are Varg's bars. I like to run Renthals, but I don't know what the Varg's handlebars feel like. The Renthal twin walls that I have, I like that feel, but maybe it feels like that. No idea. Charger, again, I can't really talk about. This is something I don't have any frame of reference for. Foot pegs. They brag about these foot pegs because they're the lightest foot pegs on the market, but they look really fragile. So, I don't know. To me, it's a weird thing. It's a weird brag to be like, these are the lightest on the market, but I don't see how they could be because the titanium ones exist and they just look fragile. So I don't know. Foot pegs are weird. That's a negative for me. Skid plate. They don't have an option. They have to use a skid plate because if they don't, it's like directly to batteries and motors, which is not something. So that's, yeah. Lights. They're not talking about things that are really impressive about this bike, which really kind of is weird to me. There's things that they should be saying that they're not saying. For examples, here you can see the bike. in all of its glory. And you see it's the swing arm here has a weird hole in it, and you're like, why is that? Well, this is something they don't market, they don't talk about. Maybe it's because it's too nerdy or something, but the linkage is actually, they've spent a lot of time to bring this linkage underneath up and out of the way of rocks and stuff. So they had to add this hole on the swing arm to make that accessible so that you could service your shock. That's not talked about anywhere on their page, and that's a really big deal because my first thing is, oh, it has a linkage. I need to get a giant skid plate to cover that, and they're like, oh, don't worry, we've got you covered. But they don't tell you anywhere that that's the case. It's kind of insane. There's a bunch of little things on these bikes that make them actually really good value, and they make them very tempting that they don't talk about, and it's very weird. So yeah, like obviously we've talked about a lot, and this has gone on for a while, but they don't brag about their warranty or how good that is. They should have, that should be a big deal because their customers are very adamant that when something goes wrong, they fix it, and that's not normal. There's another thing. This bike comes with the charger. That's not a big deal, but it comes with a really nice torque. It comes with a really nice toolkit that has two separate torque wrenches in it, and it comes, apparently, from what I've heard and what I've seen from Stark, it comes with everything you need to take this bike completely apart. Why are they not showing that? Why is that not a thing? So while I think Stark is one of those companies that does a really good job of looking really good, they're also like kind of dropping the ball, and it's almost as if they expect that, because it's almost as if they expect all of these things, like, oh, you should be able to have different suspension, you should be able to have different colors, you should be able to have different wheels, and they don't even think about that as being something worthy of bragging about. But it is. They're the only ones that do that. They're the only ones that have those options, and they're the only ones that come with a toolkit so that you can work on your own bike. And most people are afraid of working on electric bikes. That's one of the big things, is like, oh, well, when electric bikes take over, nobody's going to work on their own bike. And here Stark is dropping everything you need to change and work on your own bike to not have to bring it to a dealership. None of the other brands do that. Not Beta, not KTM, not Kawasaki. They don't give you toolkits and step-by-step guides on their YouTube to change these things. So I do think it's a little odd that they don't brag about more about that. I guess they expect us to come across it naturally, but that's something that's not, and you don't naturally come across that you get a toolkit with the bike. And I think that that's dangerous. That should be very obvious to everyone. And the reason I say it's dangerous is that dealerships might hold back those tools that Stark, the company, intended to go to the customer. And the dealership might say, oh, if you want the tools, it's this much extra money. But if Stark were to say, no, bold on their website, here's another feature, it comes with this, just like they do with the cell phone display, and they say, like, no, it comes with this display, I know and I expect to get my Stark bike or whatever, is still the Varg, to get my Stark with this phone. I know I'm going to get a phone with this bike. It's something that just comes with it. I know I'm going to get the charger with this bike. It comes with it. They talk about that. But I don't know if I were to order one of these bikes, if it were to come with that toolbox. So, like, I should know, because Stark has said publicly, oh, this comes with the bike. They don't say this is an added thing that you can buy. They just straight up say this comes with the bike, but I'm not seeing it here. And I think that dealerships will take advantage of that. So that's something that I wish that they would do a better job of bragging about, but it feels like they just assume that every dealership is going to be good and that no one's going to try and take advantage of the customer, which is just naive, to put it nicely. I don't care what makes my rear wheel spin. If my rear wheel is spinning because of four-stroke combustion, if my rear wheel is spinning because of mixed gas, if my rear wheel is spinning because of magnets, I'm still on a dirt bike, and at the end of the day, I'm still enjoying that experience. I've never ridden an electric bike. There is a possibility that I don't like the way that they feel, but I doubt it. I mean, it's still a dirt bike. It's still, you're still doing the same skills. It still requires all of that work. And I've heard really good things about these bikes. And what I find so odd about this dirt bike and this brand is just how much it makes people mad. To me, that's I don't know if I could deal with those comments. If I bought a Stark and made videos with it, I know I would see a horrendous sum of comments about me being gay. Like, what's wrong with that? Why is that? Why is that an insult? Okay, so what? I don't understand why this bike is associated with negativity, and also why that negativity goes right to that. It's so weird to me. It brings out the worst in people, is what I'm trying to say. This bike just makes people say rude stuff that they would not say in person. And if they did, they would have to deal with the consequences. So, I don't, me personally, I'm afraid to own one of these motorcycles, not because of potentially it breaking, not because parts availability is hard, not because of any logical reason other than the fact that I do make a lot of videos with dirt bikes and I don't know if I could freaking personally, eventually it would just wear me down and I would just, I don't know, it would be tough. It's a weird thing to have to consider in a dirt bike, right? Like, people saying rude stuff should not be something I consider when I'm looking to purchase a motorcycle. Other than the fact that I do not, and probably I have never owned a new motorcycle due to pricing. I think they're absurdly expensive. This one is right there, $14,000. Um, if price were not an object, this bike would be top of my list. Does that mean that I'm not a motorcycle enthusiast? Does that mean that I don't also rip a 300cc two stroke? No. Why is that even something that I have to consider? Why do I have to consider how much people will why would there be so much negativity based around this motorcycle? I don't understand that. Maybe you can explain it to me in an actual way other than saying, "Oh, it's because they're gay." Because they're not, dude. It doesn't matter what makes your engine spin. It doesn't. I'm sorry. This whole if you ride a blank blank, you're this thing. It's just such a played out stupid argument. This started back when two strokes started getting replaced with four strokes, and people have been doing it ever since. Just stop, man. Just knock it off. Come up with some original, actual criticism of this motorcycle and talk to me about it. And I would love to hear it. What don't you like? Range anxiety is a legitimate thing to say. I also would be concerned about that. I have done enduro races that last 6 hours. This bike would not be compatible for that. So I couldn't do those races, or I would have to use another motorcycle. That's a legitimate concern to say range anxiety. Okay. Or I'm concerned because it's a relatively new brand and I don't want to spend $14,000 on a potential brand that might go away. That's a legitimate concern. Those are good. I like those. Talking about that stuff is like, yeah, okay, thank you. I like that. But why is that not what people are saying? Why are people only talking about what this bike says about the rider? I just think it shows that there's a weirdness around dirt bikes. There's definitely a level of like maturity that a lot of dirt bike riders show or don't show, and it's sad to say that electric motorcycles are the thing that make people angry or not angry. Like, what? It's a motorcycle. It reminds me of scooters versus skateboards or BMX bikes versus skateboards. It's just silly. Anyways, I like this bike. I think that it's actually a really good value. I think it's extremely expensive. But if you compare what you get, this bike compared to a new KTM, this bike has a lot more stuff. It comes with options that you don't get from a new big brand like KTM, Husqvarna. It comes with a toolbox that you don't get. The charger, I'm saying, is irrelevant because obviously it comes with a charger. It's an electric bike. But the options that you get on this thing, the colors, suspension, wheels, you get the option of power, but you get that with 250 versus 450 anyways. Kind of make this bike top of, in my opinion, the value charts. And the fact that over the long term, it is a lower maintenance cost is, again, kind of like, oh, makes the bike more financially interesting. And I think that it is going to be an extremely fun motorcycle to ride. I think it will be very good. The reason I didn't mention clutch throughout this whole video is because I know what the bike can do as it sits. Um, if you don't know, type in Eddie Carlson and you'll realize, okay, maybe I'm overthinking it. So until I get an opportunity or the chance to ride an actual Stark or electric bike that doesn't have a clutch, I'm gonna keep my like it doesn't make sense for me to have an opinion on something that I don't have any experience with. Which I guess, yeah. Would I like to see a clutch? Yes, I like to use the clutch all the time. But I see trials riders riding electric bikes without clutches, and they're still able to do everything. But I do think it needs one. Yes, I'll have an opinion. I think it should have a clutch, even though you might never use it. The issue is where if you put a clutch on it, the rear brake has to go to the bottom, and so I think that's probably why they didn't do it. But I've never ridden an electric bike. I feel like maybe the clutch is actually relevant. It's possible. Yeah, only the time will tell. So yeah, what do you think? What are your reasons to not buy a Stark Varg? What are your reasons that you would buy one? Cost is obviously an issue. Is it the electric issue? Is it range anxiety? Do you think that quality might not be good? I've heard they're good quality, so maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a bad thing. Sound off. Let me know in the comments, and yeah, I'll be there. I'll be hanging out with you. I'll be talking to you about it. Personally, this is I think should be one of the top bikes for enduro and motocross guys, simply because of the value and the options. I really do think that Stark should be bragging more about certain things that they're not. And I think that other companies should see what this motorcycle company offers when you buy one of their motorcycles. And I think other companies, Yamaha, KTM, I could keep going. The other companies should see what they offer and take note and do that. That's my thoughts. I think that I would ride the living crap out of this. I know I'd get hate in the comments. I know it'd be constant and nonstop. So, yeah. What do you think? Let me know. And yeah, see you. Thanks for watching.